Okay, so right now we have the Mac Studio with the M1 Ultra inside it, and it is a super powerful device. Even myself, I have played around with this. However, a lot of you guys are asking me, Matt, when is the MacBook Pro going to get an M1 Ultra inside it? What is its release date and its price? I just want to know when it's coming out and what will the full specs be. Well, today I'm going to try my best to answer these questions. When we're possibly going to get our hands on the MacBook Pro M1 Ultra, if at all, and the best way to do this is to talk about the M1 Ultra chipset itself. So listen up carefully, because this will explain when we'll be getting our hands on the MacBook Pro M1 Ultra. So if you didn't know already, essentially the M1 Ultra is two M1 Maxes stitched together, and literally Apple have showed this recently at their peak performance event. For cause, basically the M1 Ultra is based on the M1 Max. So M1 Max right now, we get a 10-core CPU, and inside that we have 2 efficiency cores and 4 performance cores. So you can imagine with M1 Ultra, you basically double that. You've basically got 4 efficiency cores and you've also got 16 performance cores. But then the $4,000 starting price Mac Studio with the M1 Ultra for GPU starts in with 48 GPU cores inside it. And the main reason again is because the binned version of the M1 Max has 24 cores for its GPU. So again, you essentially double it, what gives you 48 cores for its GPU performance. Now, if we're doubling everything, you can imagine the actual footprint of the M1 Ultra is double the size of the M1 Max, and that is essentially true. Have a look at the M1 Max here inside a MacBook Pro and look how large it is, and then compare the M1 Ultra inside a Mac Studio. It is really, really big, and essentially again, I'm going to repeat myself, is because it's 2 M1 Maxes inside it. Now, along with this as well, being that we're drawing 2 CPUs or 2 sort of chipsets, 2 M1 Maxes here, you can imagine the power that's being pulled to basically provide all these cores with enough power to work correctly is double again of what you get on the M1 Max. And with that as well, basically you're going to be getting a lot of heat from the M1 Ultra, and that is partly the reason why the Mac Studio is designed the way it is. It has 2 really big beefy fans inside it to keep that M1 Ultra really cool, especially when you chuck some really high intensive tasks at that CPU and GPU or the whole chipset of the M1 Ultra, and that's the reason why it's designed like this. So with all of this in mind, I think you can guess what I'm going to say next of all. Will the MacBook Pro get an M1 Ultra inside it? The simple answer is no. It will not get one right now. But to be honest, there is hope for the future, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But let me explain the reasons why M1 Ultra would just not work inside a MacBook Pro right now. So first is price. So right now, to get the binned M1 Max inside, say a 16-inch MacBook Pro, it costs $3,300 US. And that gives you that 24-core GPU and gives you that 10-core CPU. But if you look right now on the Mac Studio, comparing the M1 Max to the M1 Ultra, there's a $2,200 price dollar difference. So we applied that over to the MacBook Pro. Basically, the starting price for an M1 Ultra, remember this is the binned version of the M1 Ultra with 48 cores, the starting price would be $5,700 for a 16-inch MacBook Pro. That is absolutely crazy pricing for an actual laptop, and I don't think many people out there would want to pay that much for a MacBook. It's just really, really crazy and silly. So price aside, first of all, I don't think Apple would do something like this. I know they do price quite high for a lot of their machines, but this would just be a bit too crazy, especially that is the starting price for M1 Ultra with like 1 terabyte of storage, 64 gigabytes of RAM, because that's what M1 Ultra needs. If you spec'd it up to put more RAM in it, more storage inside it, I just can't even imagine what the price would be. I bet you could probably configure a 10 grand MacBook Pro, and that's just really, really silly, to be deadly honest. But I can tell you something that is not silly and something that is completely free to do right now, and that is to enter into this channel's giveaway, and it is for this. It is for a MacBook Air, and I'm going to be giving away this MacBook Air. By the way, this is not the binned version. This is the 8-core GPU, and it's got 512 gigabytes of storage inside it to one lucky subscriber when we get over 400,000 subscribers. And all you need to do to enter in to possibly get your hands on this MacBook Air is basically write write down in the comments below of what Apple gear, what technology gear you're planning to buy in 2022. Put it down in the comments below, and when we get over 400,000 subscribers, I'll be announcing who the winner is of this MacBook Air. So make sure, if you are new here, to make sure you subscribe to this channel and also hit that notification bell, because you'll want to get that notification of that video when I announce who the winner is of this MacBook Air. Now, with that just said, I just want to quickly say there are a lot of scammers, there are a lot of spammers out there, a lot of them impersonating even myself, telling you to WhatsApp them, Telegram them, ignore them or report them. They are not me at all, just do not even listen to them. Like I said, I'll be announcing who the winner of this MacBook Air when we get over 400,000 subscribers. So with that out of the way, let's talk about a few more reasons of why M1 Ultra would not work inside a MacBook Pro. So as much as the idea of an M1 Ultra inside a MacBook Pro does sound pretty cool, because you basically get double the amount of CPU cores and GPU cores, so basically essentially 20 CPU cores, 48 GPU cores, you can imagine the size of that M1 Ultra is going to be really, really big. It's double the size of the M1 Max, what I just showed here. And basically you can imagine to put an M1 Ultra inside a MacBook Pro, even a 14-inch model, you're going to have to sacrifice something. And most likely the thing that you'd have to sacrifice is battery space, or the amount of batteries that are inside this. So that means the capacity of the battery would be smaller inside the 14 and the 16-inch MacBook Pros. But along with that as well, don't forget, essentially the M1 Ultra is two M1 Maxes. So with that does mean basically the power drain on those batteries are going to be probably about double, and yet you've got a smaller battery inside that as well. And that would just be really, really stupid to do that. Right now with M1 Max inside a MacBook Pro 16-inch, you get 18 hours of battery life, and that's if you turn down your screen a fair bit, don't put high performance tasks on it. And the same with a 14-inch MacBook Pro, you actually get about 14 hours with that right now with an M1 Max inside it. So you can imagine putting an M1 Ultra inside this, you're probably going to essentially get around about say 6 to 8, 9 hours on both of the machines of battery life. You basically half it. Possibly a little bit more, because like I said, the actual batteries would have to be cut down a little bit to fit the M1 Ultra. It'd just be absolutely ridiculous to do this, and Apple would not be able to claim like all-day battery life or anything like this. And I bet a lot of you guys would moan out there that the second that you've done say 1 or 2 video exports, say in 8K or even 4K, your battery's going to be practically dead, or at 50% or even less than that. It's just not worth Apple doing this at all. But then there's one more factor to think about, and that is cooling. So right now, the MacBook Pros, the 14 and 16-inch, are designed to keep the likes of an M1 Max really, really cool. But if you were to put an M1 Ultra, essentially doubling the CPU cores, remember the M1 Pro has the same amount of CPU cores as the M1 Max, and you're doubling that as well, you'd have to redesign the fans inside the MacBook Pros. So possibly you'd have to make these fans even bigger and even chunkier, and you can guess what that means. That means basically even more battery sacrifice, and especially that they're going to be more powerful fans, they're going to drain even more battery. It's just going to be absolutely ridiculous to do this. And then finally, the last remark I'd want to say on that, because the fans would probably have to be bigger, look at the size of the Mac Studio that you've got here, you'd probably have to make the actual MacBook even thicker than it is. And a lot of you guys have actually complained that the MacBook is a bit more chunkier than the last generation. A lot of you have accepted the reason why. It's because of heat itself and they had to do this, but imagine with an M1 Ultra, you'd have to even make this MacBook Pros even thicker again. It's just going to get really, really silly, and you just basically have a laptop from the 90s and the thickness that you would have. It'd probably even be more chunkier than the likes of say a gaming laptop out there, or has some powerful fans to keep like those Nvidia and those AMD graphics cards cool with the CPU. So I think you get the point here. It's not likely it's going to happen anytime soon. The only way it's possible that we will see an Ultra chip inside it, maybe M2 Ultra, M3 Ultra, or something into the future, the only way is to make the M1 Ultra smaller, so basically that we can get good battery life out of it. Also, it doesn't drain as much power out of the actual battery, what we're doing right now with say the likes of M1 Ultra in the Mac Studio or M1 Max. And then finally, the last thing that needs to happen is that the M1 Ultra, or the Ultra chip, what they ever put in it, M2 Ultra, M3 Ultra, would actually have to run a lot cooler, so the current fans that we have inside the MacBook Air can keep it cool without redesigning the whole MacBook Pro altogether. So there's your answer, guys. I don't think the M1 Ultra or any Ultra is probably coming to the MacBook Pro anytime soon. Are you disappointed by this? Or do you think the likes of an M1 Max is more than enough power what you should have inside the MacBook Pro? I'd love to know your thoughts and put them down into the comments below. And with that, guys, it's time to wrap up this video. So if you have enjoyed watching it, please do press the like button, and also at the same time as well, if you want to hear the latest Apple news, reviews and comparisons, please make sure you subscribe to this channel and also hit that notification bell. Until next time, guys, I will see you really soon. Take care now. Bye bye.